Accutron watches present The Accutron Show, a time travel through American culture, with your hosts David Graver and Indrani. Visit AccutronWatch.com and discover the brand that has made American history with an all-new proprietary next-generation electrostatic energy movement. Accutron. It's not a timepiece, it's a conversation piece.
I had an imaginary friend. I had this childhood imaginary friend. His name was Mikey, and he was very much like Dwayne Wayne from a different world meets like the Fresh Prince from the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
The person you heard at the top of the show is today's guest, actor, philanthropist, and author Jay Ellis. But first up, my co-host Indrani and me, David Graver, here on a new episode of The Accutron Show. Stay tuned.
This podcast is presented by Accutron Watches. Visit our website, accutronwatch.com, and discover our iconic SpaceView 2020 collection, recreating the stunning visual impact of the original open dial design, combined with an all-new electrostatic energy movement. Time just changed. Again. The Accutron SpaceView 2020.
Indrani, welcome. It's so nice to see you. I love that you have called in to us from Brazil while you're making your documentary feature. I am so happy that our last guest of the season is a really dear friend, the actor and writer Jay Ellis, and his book, Did Everyone Have an Imaginary Friend or Just Me?, which we have here, just happened to come out. I'm so excited to talk about imaginary friends and imagination and even like looking back upon our youth.
It's so great to be with you again, David. I'm all the way on the opposite side of the world, but my heart is there in the studio with you. And I'm excited to meet Jay. He's such a fascinating human with so many facets. I'd love to know more about your friendship with him. How did you guys meet?
We actually met when I was assigned to cover an event that he was throwing at Sundance many years ago. And one summer later, we found ourselves at the same chateau in the south of France for work, and we've been sort of close colleagues ever since. I also love that we're talking about imaginary friends. Did you have an imaginary friend?
I sure did. I have a few imaginary friends still today.
I love that so much. It definitely makes sense. I mean, you are a person of imagination. You are a creator. Jay is a person of imagination. He's not only authored this book, but he has starred in a very successful HBO television show, Insecure. He was in Top Gun Maverick. He continues to wow with all of his creative exploits. And I think we're going to learn today how it all goes back to the way he was raised and the way he sort of developed survival skills going to, I believe it was 12 different schools in 13 years, how you sort of have to cope, how you have to develop friendships for yourself and learn how to, I guess, for lack of better words, survive in social environments.
Absolutely. The reason I had an imaginary friend was because I was a lonely immigrant kid that couldn't figure out how to make friends with the real humans. So it was always in nature that I would find my friends. But it's amazing to see how people flourish and change, and those early imaginations can really help through really difficult times.
I think imagination is an excellent topic. Knowing that we're about to break for the end of the season after this episode, we'll give people to think about and maybe imagine what they could be doing with Accutron next year. And now, more from Jay Ellis on the last episode of this season of The Accutron Show.
This podcast is presented by Accutron Watches. Visit our website, accutronwatch.com, and discover our Accutron DNA collection. Reimagined for a new generation, the Accutron DNA combines breakthrough technology, precise engineering, and modern aesthetics to achieve a new level of technical excellence. The Accutron DNA, the new face of time for those who blaze new trails.
Jay Ellis, thank you for being with us here today. I want to start by saying I started my day at the Barnes & Noble bookstore on 14th Street, or Union Square, where I bought your book. I think there's no more fulfilling experience than buying the book of someone that you care about, and it's here with us right now in the studio.
Thank you.
And I want to say, I'd love to know, when did you know you wanted to write this book?
I don't know that I knew. I think it just started kind of happening. It was back in the pandemic, and I had posted this silly video online asking people about their imaginary friends and if they had one and what their experience was, and am I the only one who had one? And I got all these replies and responses from people talking about their kid's imaginary friend or their imaginary friend when they were a kid, or their brothers or their sisters or their cousins. And I started to realize, like, it's so much more of a prevalent thing than what most people probably think. And like, why do kids have imaginary friends? And so I really just started kind of writing all these silly stories of my own experience. And then I looked up and I had written pages and pages and pages. And I sent it to someone that I worked with at the time. And they were like, we're going to send it to a book agent. We think this could be something. And it was something. And the next thing I knew, I was writing a book.
It's quite remarkable.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I'm sure that's not how most people's experiences go.
But still effective nonetheless.
Yeah.
What an exciting way to explore a whole new career as a writer. I mean, how many interesting things you've done in your life. And I just find it fascinating that you've been able to pivot so many times and discover new facets of yourself with so much boldness. What do you attribute your ability to transform in these ways to?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it is just my innate desire to tell story and connection to story. And I think that comes across in so many different ways, from writing to acting to directing. And so I think when you have the bug of wanting to be a storyteller, like it comes out however it wants to come out, and you can't necessarily stop it. And so I find myself inspired at different times by different things. I find myself intrigued and want to learn more about different things. And I think it's just this kind of never-ending quest, both to learn, but then also to tell story in an effective way that feels like it reaches people.
In your book, you introduce everyone to your childhood imaginary friend, Mikey.
Yeah.
I'm now acutely familiar with that story, but would you share it with our listeners?
Yeah, so I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and I'm an only child. I went to 12 schools in 13 years. I moved around quite a bit, and I had an imaginary friend. I had this childhood imaginary friend. His name was Mikey, and he was very much like Dwayne Wayne from a different world meets like the Fresh Prince from the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And he was very mischievous, a little bit of Arrested Development. But we went on all these amazing adventures together. And he came to me one night during a storm in Tampa, Florida. I was in my bed. I was terrified to get out of my bed because I thought the floor was a swamp and there were alligators everywhere. And he kind of popped over my shoulder and made this comment like, we ain't gonna be no Crocs dinner. And after that, I just remember him being in my life. And I don't, to be fair, I had to go back and ask my mother and my father and my grandparents and cousins and aunts and uncles. I had to ask so many people about their experiences with Mikey as well, via me, obviously. And that really helped kind of paint the picture and tell the whole story.
Of who he was to you.
Of who he was to me, yeah.
I think that it raises such interesting questions about imagination and friendship and the human capacity to create a community, even when you're alone. I was a lonely immigrant kid who also had imaginary friends that I found in the woods. And so I've had this connection to nature ever since. I'm really curious, did you have other friends? Was he filling a gap in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had friends going in and out of schools. It's interesting. Like, I talk about this in the book, but like I would put on a different persona for every school I went to. Like if I didn't like the jock at my previous school, then I was going to be the book nerd at my next school. And then after that, I was going to be like the Latin lover at one of my schools because my middle name is Ramon. And then I was going to be, I like literally with every school I went to, I changed personas, but I did always find a way to make friends. I was a class clown. So it happened because I moved around so much. I was like, I think my young brain was trying to figure out the shortcut to get into friend groups as soon as possible. But I think where Mikey really came into my life and the need that he filled, because I think, to your question, like imagination, we all have it and it kind of burns away when we get a little older and we don't look at it the same way or we think we're not creative, but you are. It's innate. It's in there. It was there when you were a kid. But as a kid, your imagination kind of creates what you need. It gives you the things you need in order to process the world around you. And I think for me, the chaos of growing up in that time and then also moving around so much, I think is why Mikey came into my life. So he was there for companionship for sure, and he was there to be a friend, but he was really there for some of those moments when I was like new in a school and I was trying to figure my way into friend groups.
This morning, when discussing imaginary friends with my husband, who's from Paris, he told me his imaginary friend happened to be a husky dog. And the dog had a very American name, like, it was Jimmy. And I was wondering why this French child had this imaginary husky dog.
Yeah.
And he sort of explained the gap that the dog was filling. He wasn't allowed to have pets. His dad didn't believe in dogs as household animals. Mm-hmm. And he just sort of gushed through this and shared all this information. Have you been surprised at how many people have been like, thank you for sharing this. I had an imaginary friend. I want to talk to you about it.
Yeah, I mean, I again, going back to like that very first post that I put up during the pandemic, I was so shocked by people's responses. And then I did a bunch of research, which I talk about in the book, and I have pulled some excerpts from different studies that I read and essays and books and things. And again, 68% of all children have an imaginary friend experience of some kind. And the broader context is like, even if you think that your stuffed animal can talk, or your stuffed or your doll or a car, like you are using your imagination to put life essentially or personality into this object. And so that even kind of falls under that definition. But it's really amazing to like hear so many people tell me their stories, or people say, man, I wish I had an imaginary friend. I was so jealous my sister had one. I also go to school, I have a daughter, and she goes to school with a couple of kids. She's 4.5 years old. A couple of kids who have imaginary friends. And one of the moms one day at a birthday party, I just overheard her say like, oh my God, he has an imaginary friend. Like, do you think he's going to turn out weird? Like, what does it mean? Like, I don't understand he just sits in a corner sometimes and just talks to him. I'm terrified. Like, does he need more friends? And I'm like, no, he's fine. He's giving himself what he needs. He's creating like what he needs to like get through his day and make him feel full. And he still also has all his friends at school. So he's fine. But it's been amazing to hear people's responses.
I think it's so interesting that you've used your creativity in so many different ways, and that stability that you created with that imaginary friend. Perhaps that's something that helped you to be able to jump into different environments, right? Being a PR person, being jumping right into TV, into films, and all these different areas. A lot of people get really nervous when they try something new, and it sounds like you have a lot of confidence when you start a new project. How do you advise people who are going through life changes when they are going to dive into something new? What's the best way to bring your A game?
Yeah. It's tough because I go through all the same moments that everyone goes through. I think there's always questions of if you can and why are you doing this and how will it turn out and is it going to be any good or will people like it? But I think the thing that I always try to come back to is if I'm afraid of it, speaking from a creative standpoint, if I'm afraid of it, then I need to try it. I need to do it because there's only growth in vulnerability. There's only growth in trying and failing because you're going to try again and you're going to get a little bit better and then you're going to try again and then you're going to be pretty good and you're going to try again and then you're going to be great. But there's only growth in that. So I just believe that like fear This is a really amazing Will Smith quote that he did in the interview that pops around on Instagram every once in a while. But he said, fear is the fastest way to mediocrity. And I always loved that because it's true. Like, if you're afraid, then you won't try. Well, if you don't try, then you can't get better. And if you can't get better, then you can't get good. And if you can't get good, then you can't get great. And for me, I think I just feel like diving into things is a part of the human experience. Like, we're not meant to be the same. We change at every stage of our life. And by the way, we live in a world that's constantly changing. So we should be exploring ourselves and through different ways and trying things and realizing we love them or we don't love them, and then pursuing them again because we do love them. And I think that's what I try to do with everything that I'm passionate about, everything I'm interested in.
I want to take Indrani's question and even make it more personal in that you are a father.
Yeah.
And you have a book about the power of imagination. What are your dreams for your children with regard to their imagination? What do you hope they can explore or live or be?
Yeah. It's funny. My daughter has 20 imaginary cousins. She does not know any of their names. It's just there's 20 of them. That's all we know. And then she has one imaginary friend whose name is Jack. And she'll go off and she'll play and she'll read a book or, point at the pictures in a book, and she'll play with her, her stuffed animals or her toys or whatever, and it'll be her and Jack for a while. But what I think is really interesting is she was an only child for a while. She's no longer an only child, but she was. And I think that, again, she was filling this need for herself. And one of the things that's really cool is, like, now with this perspective, looking down at her and watching her with her imaginary friend, and the thing that pops in my mind is like, oh, I want to encourage it. I want her to have fun with it. I want her to tell Jack to come get in the car with us. I want all of those things because it makes her happy. Like, there's joy there. Like, that's what childhood should be. So if that's the most basic thing that it's doing, then awesome. But I hope that imagination leads to, her finding her own passions and creativity and taking it wherever she wants to go. And which is a thing I think we all need.
Absolutely. I think that encouragement is so powerful. So I just came out of the Amazon where I've been working with an indigenous tribe, and it's so interesting because our imagination references are so shaped by our culture. So there in the tribe, when people are imagining, when kids are imagining, they're really connecting with nature. They're hearing the spirits. I mean, they're really hearing them, right? They're really listening to nature. They're listening to the voice of the flowers and the trees and things. What do you think about the contextual aspects of creative imagination? Do you think that it's something that's universal, or is it specific to each place?
No, it's interesting. I think there are some universal things for sure. I think, but to your point, it's always in nuance, right? And based in your own experience. And so I think what's universal, for example, is watching a 4, 5, 6-year-old in the States play with their imaginary friend, but then watch kids in the Amazon use their joy is the thing they get out of it, right? Happiness is the thing. So like, it's a universal thing, even though it's couched in nuance. There's still like a feeling that they get when they do that, and the giggles and the laughs and the creating of community, to the point that you said earlier, like, that's all still there. And so I definitely think there are things on both sides that are very much lived in an experience. And then also you zoom out and, like, no matter where you are in the world, like, you're still giving yourself what you need, and you're giving yourself happiness and joy and fulfillment and play also. It's really cool.
Agree.
The Amazon. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Jay, thank you. We'll be back after this message from Accutron.
This podcast is presented by Accutron Watches. Visit our website, accutronwatch.com, and discover our legacy collection. Reviving some of the most memorable Accutron watches from the 60s and 70s, the Legacy Collection combines timeless design with the technical excellence of Swiss watchmaking, each limited to 600 individually numbered pieces. The Accutron Legacy Collection, inspired by the past, built for your future.
We're back at the Accutron Show with Jay Ellis and with David Graver, my co-host. excited to hear more about your tour that you're on, Jay. You're in the middle of a book tour, right? And with this incredible subject.
I am in the middle of a book tour. I'm actually in day 2 of this book tour, and it has been wild. Very long days, fulfilling days, amazing days. I can't believe I put a book out in the world, so it's so crazy. But I was in Harlem last night. I did a bunch of press all day yesterday. I'm in Brooklyn tonight. And then I'm going to Philly, DC, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Houston, LA. I do a couple of events. Where else? Portland, Sacramento. Then I take a break, and then I go back out in the road in the fall. It's amazing. It's fun it's such a different way or experience rather than promoting a film or a television show. I love getting to go to all these places and like actually just be with people. It's been amazing so far, and I'm so looking forward to doing so much more of it and getting the book on the road. Also, so many people you asked this question earlier, but so many people in every city that I go to, like people are coming because they're like curious about their kid's imaginary friend, or they want to tell me their story about their imaginary friend, and it's such a fun experience to be out on the road and also get to see the country, because I don't get to see it like this that often anymore with work and my schedule. So.
In addition to releasing a book this very week, you're also an acclaimed actor you've touched a lot of people with your work in that industry. I'm curious to know, when did you know it was going to be okay? Acting is harrowing and it's competitive, and you bridged that gap and you made it. When did you know?
That's interesting. I don't know that I tell people all the time that like you have to be just dumb enough to believe that you can do it. And I think I was just dumb enough. Like I was just a little bit more than just dumb enough to believe I could do it. So it's one of the few things where like I just don't know that there was never a plan B. Like it was for broke, like, you know, and this was all I was gonna do. And so, you know, obviously there are markers in your life that you can look at and you can say, oh, I make a full-time living as an actor, or oh, I was able to buy a car or pay off a student loan, or I don't know, go on a trip or buy my mom or dad a nice gift or something. Like, sure, like there are markers that are that, but it's interesting because it's such an industry of runs. Like people go on runs, and sometimes they last for years and sometimes they also are gone for years. And I think one of the things that I always try to like just remember is like it's all a journey. It's all a roller coaster. It's meant to be all of the things. And in embracing that, I don't have to live in disappointment. I don't have to live in fear. I don't have to live in doubt. I can just know that like, sure, I may not work this week, but I'm gonna work next week. And I'm okay with that. And it makes me happy, to be quite honest, because I get to sleep at night.
That's excellent.
That's really fascinating. I'd love to hear about your perspective of the difference between acting in TV and acting in films. You know, I'm a director and I really only know the world of films, but the TV world is fascinating. Tell me more.
It's fast paced. It is fast paced. Even when you get the luxury of time in television, it is still very fast paced. I mean, you're just shooting a lot more pages a day usually. There's not a lot of room for reworking something, like if it doesn't work. Like TV scripts usually are so tight because they've been poured over for months and approved by so many people have had to read them and give notes on them. And so when you do an episode of a television show, pretty much what's on the page is going to end up on the screen. Versus a film, there's a little bit more room to breathe. Sometimes the film finds itself while it's filming, and then some scenes are being rewritten or being reshot. And then obviously editing is wildly different. You know, again, with a TV show, like you're coming in at a time that a network tells you, right? 28 minutes, 29 minutes, 24, versus in film, you get the luxury of time a little bit more. You can make it 3-4 minutes longer, 3-4 minutes shorter, and really edit the story and build the story the way you want. The one thing I'll say is like, I love both immensely. There is something about the family that's created on a television show that is pretty remarkable. Like getting to see people year after year and creating something that you all love is a really, really cool thing. And you get to like see people, you know, you hear about their kids growing up, you hear about their kids' soccer game, you hear about them getting married or them having a kid. Like you get to be a part of people's lives for a while, and that's a really fun experience. But it's nice to pop a film in there too, because sometimes you're like, oh yeah, this is great knowing you. All right, bye-bye.
At the top of the show, Indrani and I talked about how we actually met at Sundance. That was our beginning a few years ago. And we were able to see each other again this Sundance. Yeah. I would love for you to talk about the two projects you had there, but I want to start with the Sue Bird documentary because of the fact that, and I told you this in Park City, I am from Connecticut. I grew up in Connecticut, and one of my first heroes came from UConn women's basketball team, and it was Sue Bird, and I looked up to her from such a young age and was so empowered by what she was able to do. Yeah. And then you have amplified her voice, and I'm so grateful for that, and I think everyone is, and you made a marvelous film because of it.
Thank you.
Will you talk a little bit about that process?
Man, what what a road. First of all, Sue Bird, legend in every single way, and all the things you think of her are true. She is really a great human, an absolutely lovely person, and so focused and so driven. And she's in this new chapter in her life where she's open to now finding who she is, not as a professional athlete, and what that life is going to be. And so, you know, Sue was getting towards year 20. We reached out and we had a conversation, and I just said, hey, you know, how can you say, like, you know, you should retire? You know, you can't say that, and even asking about it is like rude. But I just said, if you ever think about retirement, we would love to follow you and shoot a doc and just document what that experience is like. And she knew she wanted to play through the Olympics. Obviously, they got pushed because of the pandemic, so that meant that she was going to play a little bit longer. And then finally she came back and she said yes. We got to follow her for a year and a half, almost 2 years through her career, and build this really amazing story of Sue Bird, who picked up a basketball when she was like 4 or 5 years old and just put it down, you know, 30-something years later. And it was amazing. It was amazing to be able to tell the story of someone so great, so selfless, but also such an amazing leader with a strong point of view about women's rights, LGBTQ rights, women's professional sports and contracts. Like, it was just such an amazing, it was a gift to be able to do that. And we met a lot of, what's the word? We got a lot of no's. A lot of people told us no. A lot of people told us that, like, no one will watch this doc, or people don't want to make this story, and people don't care about women's basketball. We got a lot of it. And to be able to take that to Sundance in front of a full theater, the largest theater of the festival, and have it fully packed and have people standing and screaming and cheering it'll always live as one of the highlights of my career.
Honestly, makes me want to cry again.
What a great story. So I got to ask you about Top Gun. What was that like?
Really cool. I mean, I got to work with another legend, and great, and somebody you could just soak up everything from, just be a sponge around Tom. You know, he really treated us all as equals. Like, you know, he wanted us, one of the first things he told us is, everything that I have done in my career and I have learned and how I prepare and how I work, I want you guys to see it. I want you guys to be exposed to it. I want to offer it to you so you can take what you want, and you can have it in your toolkit, and you can have it in your preparedness kit, and you can see the way that I've built this career. And he did exactly that. You know, for the entire time that we shot that film, he did exactly that. And so it was amazing. And, you know, he created our flight program to basically teach us how to fly, to be able to fly in the movie and to get in the jets in the movie. He constantly made sure physically we had what we needed, because it is hard being in those jets every single day. You do get beat up. He was great. And that whole experience was great. The Navy was amazing to work with. We met so many phenomenal pilots and officers, and we got to be on a boat, the Theodore Roosevelt, out at sea. That was insane. Those things are like floating cities with thousands of people and like 70 different types of aircraft, and it was wild. It was wild. My dad was in the Air Force when I was growing up. He's a mechanic in the Air Force, so aviation has been in my life literally since day one. So to be able to come back and shoot that movie was amazing.
When
cool.
we were in Park City, people would come up to me and whisper, "Have you seen Freaky Tales? What do you think of Freaky Tales? Did you get to see Freaky Tales?" And unfortunately, because of scheduling conflicts, I never got to see Freaky Tales. I know. I think you offered me a ticket, but I was already flying out.
Yeah.
What is the future of Freaky Tales, and can you give people a little bit of insight about what that project is for those of us who didn't pour over every bit of information that came out about it back in Sundance?
Yeah, I think Freaky Tales is going to be like a crazy experience for a lot of people. I think it's a 2025 movie. I don't know that we have a date yet, but Lionsgate is releasing the film, and they have been very thoughtful about how they want to release it and how they want to put it out to the world and market it and how they want to help tell this story and lift this story. Ryan Fleck and Anna Boden are an amazing duo. They've been working together for years, since out of college. They had a short that they made here in New York that went to Sundance. I think their first film premiered at Sundance, was later nominated for an Oscar. They're phenomenal filmmakers. I got a chance to work with them on Mrs. America. Anyway, Ryan grew up in the Bay Area in the 80s, and he wrote this movie about 1987 Oakland. So the whole movie takes place in 1987. It's 4 interconnected stories that all kind of culminate with my story. I play this character, Eric C.B. Floyd, who played for the Warriors, who also had, what do you want to call it? He also had a love for ancient battle weapons. Axes and swords and dowels and knives and also was a martial artist. And I kind of get to play the hero of the movie in a way. It was an amazing experience. I had to do tons of training. Again, going back to that Tom Cruise question, Tom was literally the first person I called when I realized how much fight choreography I was going to have to do in this movie, because I had to learn 5 different styles of martial arts. I had to learn how to use 6 or 7 different types of weapons. So he literally was the first person I called, and I was like, can I ask you about this? What do I do? And he kind of walked me through what he would do in that situation. It's a fun film. It is freaky. It is wild. It is going to stick with people. I can't wait to share it with folks.
I can't wait to see it.
Yeah.
What an exciting range of experiences. Can you tell us a little about your long-term relationship with Issa Rae in Insecure?
Yeah, what an amazing experience. I think you never know. You go into something and you do it, and you typically have a good idea if the work that's being done is good or not. You can never control the edit. You can never control how people receive it, but you definitely can know what's happening day to day when you're across from another actor, or you're listening to direction, or you're seeing how cameras are being set up. But we were in a bubble with that show in season 1, and we were like, I loved it. You're great. I think you're great. I mean, your character is funny. If I was going to be any character, it'd be your character. Oh my God, I went through that too. And we're in this bubble, so we don't know. We're the only ones, but we also were in a city that we lived in and loved. We were, specifically getting to pour into the vision of Issa Rae, and it comes out and people feel the same way we felt about it and more even, and it's unreal. You don't know that that's going to happen. You don't know that a show is going to just hit the zeitgeist and work. We all think, oh, that show's going to work, and then shows don't work. And so to be a part of that show and be the boyfriend that everybody loves to hate for so long was an absolutely amazing experience. And Issa, I love her to death. She's actually one of my conversation partners on my book tour in Los Angeles, in Inglewood, actually. But it was amazing to get to have that experience with her and also be a soldier in her vision, of creating this world.
This is one of my favorite questions to ask people. And it's very open-ended. Is there something that you hope people will learn about you or hope people know about you as either an artist, an author, an actor, or just as a person? What do you hope people at home know about you, Jay?
Oh, man. That's interesting. I don't know that I've ever thought about that before. I mean, I guess I would say, I think one thing would be like, I just love storytelling. Like, it doesn't matter what the form is. Like, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a television show, whether it's reading a book, I just love stories. I think we are people who come from, like, all of our ancestors were storytellers, because that's how communication happened back in the day, and that's how we learned back in the day. And I think it's in all our DNA, whether we realize it or not. So I think there's that. And then I think with the book, the thing that I come back to is like, I hope that everyone, through reading these stories of this young boy with an overactive imagination who then comes of age and having the reflection to look back at all of that now as an adult and now working in this dream field that I get to be in and as an actor and play pretend every day, I hope that people take away from the book that, like, everyone has imagination, everyone has creativity, everyone has play. It's just about tapping back into it, because your busy adult life has made you believe that you don't have it. And that's not true, because we all were kids running around and playing and climbing and, writing on the walls and painting things, whatever. We all did it. And so it's in there. It's just about finding it.
That's awesome.
So I always like to ask, what are you doing to give back? The book is definitely a way of helping people to process and deal with emotions and mental health questions and those kinds of ideas. But what do you do to give back? And is there anything that you're passionate about, and any causes that you stand up for?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer. I mean, I love, I'll say first and foremost, like reading just in general, I think is wildly important. And so I was raised by a mom who used to make me do book reports every summer, which is how my hate became love, maybe, of books, I think is the way to put it. But it's because she would make me read a book and do a book report every single summer. And I'm so grateful for that, because it kept my imagination going. It made me believe in worlds that didn't exist, or it made me believe, like, what could I do, or what could I be, or what world could I live in? And so I'm a big believer in reading, not a fan of banned books. I also, I've done a lot of work in creative writing in juvenile detention centers throughout Los Angeles County. I work with an organization called Inside Out Writers, and we teach creative writing classes as a way for kids to be able to express themselves. I've done a lot of work with AmFAR over the last decade or so. AmFAR, for folks who don't know, is an organization that funds research for AIDS and HIV. And I had an uncle who passed of AIDS in the 90s. And so it's always been super important to me to be in that space and to give back and to talk about it. But AmFAR is really interesting because although they grant funds for AIDS and HIV research, so many other things have come out of, so many other like amazing medications have actually come out of grants that they have funded that maybe didn't work necessarily in the AIDS and HIV space, but it worked for something else, which is really interesting. So those are the two or three big things that I'm really passionate about and constantly thinking about. Also, yeah.
Well, and let me ask you about the untold story policing, because I really think that police brutality is one of the biggest concerns of our time. What's your how did you start on that project? DeRay
McKesson is a good friend of mine who was one of the leaders at the Ferguson protests, and has just been he was an educator first, and has really spent the last decade or so of his life really just fully in activism and trying to make legislative change across the board at the local level, the state level, and the national level. And he called and asked. That whole thing happened because he said, "Would you ever host a podcast?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think I would." And he goes, "Well, would you do one with me?" And I was like, "Yeah, I love you. Of course I would do one with you." And he's like, "Okay, cool." The next thing I know, I was on an email with Jessica Dorver-Kramer, who runs Limonada. And she was like, "All right, so we're going to record next week. Do you have," and I was like, "Wait, what? What's happening here? What are you talking about? Recording what?" She's like, "Oh, DeRay told me told you that about the podcast." And I was like, "He asked me if I would ever host a podcast." And she walked me through the whole thing, and I fell in love with the concept. What I realized in it, and it kind of shifted from what the original pitch to me was to what it became, because I had this question of, I had this thought of like, I actually don't know. We don't really know what governs police in this country. We don't really know about police unions. We don't really know that city council votes on a police union contract. We don't really know all of those things. And so for me, it was really actually just an understanding of how that system works is the thing that I was actually most curious about, and why there had been so many failures along the way, like what allowed for so many failures, for them to fail so many people. And so that's ultimately how that podcast came to be.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jay, it's safe to say that like, when I met you, I knew that there was something different about you, that you are, in fact, a magic person. There's something about you. Even conversing with you is so compelling. And I just want to say thank you for joining both of us today on this, and that I hope everyone goes out and picks up a copy of Did Everyone Have an Imaginary Friend or Just Me by our guest, Jay Ellis. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Accutron Show. To listen to all of our shows, visit accutronwatch.com. Remember to check out our special edition Accutron products in collaboration with La Paulina Cigars, Estabrook Pens, Aseline Publishing, and Stave Puzzles. To learn more about the world of Accutron, follow us on Instagram at Accutron Watch. From New York City, until next time, Accutron time. This is Bill McCuddy.